Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you very much for taking some time out of your day to come and join us. We really appreciate it. I am really lucky to be joined by some amazing panelists this morning, and we're going to go through building a thriving company culture in social care. So thank you very much for the panel for joining me, and let's get started, shall we? So my name's Pete. For those that don't know me, I am head of partnerships for Flourish. I've been doing this for 10 and a half years, and I am really pleased, as I said, to be joined by some amazing panelists. So Karolina, if you could introduce yourself first.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Karolina, Gerlich, CEO of the Care Workers Charity and a former care worker.
Amazing. Thank you, Karolina. And Paul?
Yeah, good morning. I think you got two amazing panelists and then me. So my name's Paul Blaine. I'm the CEO of Care Business Associate Training and also Domiciliary and Care Home Services.
Amazing. Thanks, Paul. And Zoe?
Hi, I'm Zoe Worko. I'm Wellbeing and Quality Director at Riverstone, and we build retirement communities for over 65s. My background is that I was a hospital doctor, a geriatrician. I've also worked in care homes as healthcare assistant, worked in the kitchen and everything before I went to medical school and all the way through that. So I've worked in lots of different areas of the sector.
Amazing. Thank you, Zoe. I don't agree, Paul. I think three amazing panelists, you included in that one as well. So, what is workplace culture? For me, workplace culture is the things we do in our day to day that maybe get taken for granted. And Shine here said shared learning experiences that lead in turn to shared, taken for granted basic assumptions held by the members of the group or organization. And it's how we do things around here. That resonates for me, but what does it mean for you as an organization? What does it mean for social care? Skills for Care have said that 30% of people leaving a social care job cited poor workplace culture as one of their primary reasons for leaving. Younger workers, so 18 to 44, were significantly more likely to leave due to workplace culture concerns, which is a huge number when you think about workplace culture and all the things that could link back to. So my first question to the panel is, what does workplace culture mean to you? So Paul, I'm going to start with you on this one, please.
Yeah, so I mean, what you've got to set out when you start a business is what sort of culture do you want to create in that business? And then you're tasked to try and find the team members that want to work within that culture. It's when you actually have a culture that's set where you've got too many conflicting things and people going in different directions, that you start to find that culture actually decreases. But to me, what does it mean? It's everything within the businesses, because ultimately it's the driving force, the asset of how you're actually going to meet what it is that you set out to do. So I think, the word culture, it is very important to understand that it also includes individualization and behaviorisms. So you've got that situation where recruiting right for the culture that you want to set is so important. I think when you look at the slide that you put up in relation to skills for care, when you looked at the younger workforce and them leaving much more quicker, I think part of that is a generational change that we have to address. And that's because, if you're of my age or slightly older, you were brought up in a very behaviorist model, including through education, which was very much a case of do as you're told, and you will get rewarded for that. What you've found in the younger generation is the teaching model has changed significantly to become much more humanistic. And in humanistic, it's about supporting individuals and making everybody succeed. So you've kind of sometimes got a conflict going on in different management styles, and the younger people are the ones that need that support, nurturing, and care, because that's what they've been used to throughout their mainstream education. So if they come across behaviourist styles of leadership, it doesn't fit with their culture and how they want to proceed and what their values are.
Amazing. Thanks, Paul. Karolina, can I come over to you next?
Thank you. I think social care is an interesting place to look at workplace culture because in some places I see it split into two areas. There's workplace culture and how we are working with people that we support in social care. And then there is a part of workplace culture, how do we treat people that work to actually deliver that care? And it's interesting to see that in some organizations there's quite a distinct split in the attitudes there. Some of what Paul has said directed at the workers of do what you're told, at the same time telling those workers that to deliver personalized care, person-centered care, and listen to the people that they support, and trying to make sure that all of their requests, wishes are addressed. And that can become a bit, I think, difficult for co-workers to deal with when they're being asked to treat people they work with one way, but they themselves are treated in quite a different way. And it may then come across as if the worker there has fewer rights or is less important than the person that they are supporting. In more general terms of workplace culture, I would say, it's how we treat each other within the environment. It is part of it is dress code. Part of it is there an open door policy or not in terms of communications and management. Part of it is there a very punitive approach to making mistakes, or is there an understanding that everybody makes mistakes and we learn from them and then we move on? Obviously, that doesn't apply to every situation, but let's say most situations. And how we just treat each other like human beings and everybody around them. But yeah, I think social care is quite interesting in that potential split of attitudes depending who the person in the relationship is.
I think that's a really, really interesting point, Karolina. Like you said, that the people that are supported, we treat them with one way, but then actually how we treat our teams and how we treat our staff, we treat a different way. But actually, should the culture be that we are looking at everybody and treating them all the same? It's a really, really interesting point. Zoe, what about you?
So I've been fortunate or unfortunate to work in some very good and also some incredibly poor cultures. And the poorest culture I've worked in is the NHS. And I think for me, workplace culture is actually how somewhere feels. So that might be the place, if it is an office or or a care home, or it'll be how, if this is more sort of domiciliary care, people going out and about. It's about how the place or how the people make you feel. So you can have all the slogans about what the business or what the organisation thinks its culture is, but ultimately really building on what Karolina's just said, it's actually how colleagues, how staff members are treated, because that's how you then actually treat your clients, the people you're looking after properly. I was having a conversation with the founders of one of the care businesses that we choose to work with. And when I'm looking at maybe somewhere new we're working with, one of my questions is always, what is your staff retention like? Because it's such a good guide. And Anne very clearly said to me, she said, we invest in our team because our team are the people that our clients, that their families see on a day-to-day basis. And if they don't understand our culture and have our culture and live and breathe it, we're not any good. We're only as good as our team are out on the ground. And you only do that by having a positive culture where people are able to speak up, where there will always be a hierarchy, but actually people feel almost equal within that and know their role. And yeah, so you can have all the slogans you like, but for me, workplace culture is about what you feel when you go in somewhere. And if you haven't got that good feeling, the culture's rubbish, even if somebody's saying, look, our culture's excellent, we've got a lovely snazzy sign saying it.
And you raised a couple of really good points there. I think it might have been Paul or one of Paul's colleagues that said to me that as soon as you walk into a care service, you get a feeling of what type of service That is, what's the culture like straight away? My wife's grandparents are in a care home, and you walk in there and you can feel the culture there. You can feel the positivity. The staff are engaged, staff buy into what they're doing there, which is amazing. And it's that aspect that if I'm a family member walking in, if I feel that culture as I walk through the door, I'm going to feel like my family are in a good place. Amazing. Perfect. Thank you, everybody. So obviously leadership plays a massive role within company cultures. So your Skills for Care said leaders play a pivotal role in shaping and influencing workplace culture by setting the tone, standards and expectations for behavior and performance within the organization. I think we've kind of touched on some of that already. Jabal also said leadership buy-in has a big impact when senior leaders champion and demonstrate a commitment to quality improvement. This is also indicative of a good improvement culture. But my question is, obviously we talk about leadership quite a lot, but how can we all help nurture a positive, supportive and inclusive culture? Karolina, can I come to you on this one first?
Yes, thank you. I think most of all, this is going to sound, being real. And I think what some leaders or some of us struggle with is admitting that things sometimes are difficult, especially around mental health. This constant push into burnout because I have to keep going no matter what. And I know situation is difficult in social care. There are issues with vacancies, etc. But this is also what care workers see, and they see it as an expectation for them to do the same. And also this kind of being very protective of the setting, being very protective of the service, not necessarily then it being in the service's best interest, because if you don't share mistakes, if you don't share issues, if you don't share the load of all of that, I think it collapses much quicker, or issues become bigger undetected. And then it's much harder to deal with. So I think in terms of more inclusive and supportive culture, it is sharing. I think it is the leader's responsibility to say when they are struggling and ask for help. I think it's the leader's responsibility to talk about being anxious, stressed, depressed, coming close to burnout, to make it okay for other people to share it as well. In terms of positive culture, I think it is the open door policy, but I mean real open door policy. People can come and talk to you as a leader, express their concerns, and they're not going to feel like they're going to be punished for bringing concerns up, but actually they're going to be listened to, where people can come in and admit they've made a mistake, and you help them find a way to work through it and address issues and put things in place to maybe avoid that mistake being done again in the future. And for me, particularly in the care home setting, it is also facilities. It's been mentioned that, you walk into a care service and you know what kind of service it is. For me, one of those things is, are there facilities for the staff, for the workers, to have a proper break? Yeah. Not a, I don't know, cleaning cupboard somewhere around the corner, or a tiny room in the basement, but actually a proper room to relax, have a break, have some hot food, have a cup of tea, preferably with meals actually being provided while they're on shift. And I've heard now too many times on online forums, co-workers saying, oh, our staff room has been taken away for another facility for the residents. And it's great, residents are getting another facility, but who's going to help them enjoy that facility if care workers can't have a proper break? So it comes back in a way to what I said before. We need to make sure that everybody involved is treated with respect and kind of openness and recognition that they all have their needs. People that are supported have needs, and that is very well written, in care plans, that's very well documented, that is inspected against. But what about the workforce? I think leaders have the responsibility to have the conversation with each and one of the people that work for them and ask, what do you need? How can I make you supporting other people easier for you? And that includes introducing some flexibility into working hours when people may have other caring duties, looking at public transport around the area, especially if you're in the countryside and people rely on public transport, but buses only run once an hour, once every 2 hours, especially at night time. So it's being considerate, but not just for people we support, but people that deliver that support, which will then in turn enable them to be happier. And I don't think it's rocket science to say that happier care workers who have better well-being then deliver better care. But even putting aside delivering better care workers themselves have the right to have fulfilling lives that they feel happy about.
Amazing. Thank you, Karolina. I think it's probably safe to say that if you think about any type of organization, if you don't look after your team, you don't have a business at the end of the day. And I think that's quite prevalent in social care. So I'm going to come to you in just a second. If anybody doesn't have any questions that they'd like to ask, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A section or the chat. We will be coming to those at the end of the session as well. Zoe, can I come over to you next, please?
Yeah, no, of course. So, of the two definitions that you put up before this question slide, I think the skills for care one is very typically, it's top down, isn't it? How do we nurture a culture? We do it the top down and everybody will do it. So back to what Paul was saying, those different education styles. Jabal's is much, much better. It's much more of that, we're actually all of it, we're actually all in this together approach. And that's how you build the culture. You absolutely need the support from the top. But depending on the experiences and how the people at the top got to the top, I think we're probably quite unusual in that all of us on this call have done all of the work all the way through and got there. But we've all worked in areas where somebody comes in maybe from a completely different sector and they've come into social care and they've actually never been involved with, looking after somebody, helping that person meet their basic needs, in a dignified way and live the way that they want to. So yes, you need the support from the top, the leadership intention that this is what we're going to do, but the nurturing it, getting the ideas. It's all about, our colleagues on the ground, the ones doing the work. And also, whenever possible, it's actually about the clients as well. So when you've got those long-term relationships, and they're not just short-term care interventions, often sort of the clients, and I'm thinking of our residents that we have, they want to know that our team are looked after because they see our team. So, it's a culture that actually, to do this well, it also needs to extend outside of just, the direct control of the business. So the people who are paid to work in the business, the people who run the business, the people who founded the business. And it's really got to include, the clients, both their opinions, because again, that reflects in the good care. I'm not going to mention Maslow's hierarchy of needs because I'm pretty sure Paul's going to. But, it's all about treating people as people.
Amazing. Thank you. I think you're 100% right. Treat people as people. I think that's a massive line that needs to go in there. Paul, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just to strip it back, I think what Zoe said is absolutely key, in that it's an all in it together as opposed to a top driven down. However, what I would put in there as a caveat is people need something to work towards. And that's where the leadership of a business, and I'm not just talking about the manager, I'm talking people above them as well, even down to the owner. What is it that they have built? What is it that they're trying to achieve? And how are they getting people to buy into that? And when they get people to buy into it, the best way in which you can do that is to involve them, is to actually make them feel like they are part of the process to build what it is that you're trying to create. And we see that in a lot of startup businesses where people will work stupendous hours and I'm not advocating that, but they will, because it's such a passion for them. And I've experienced that in my own. So in terms of creating that positive culture, everybody needs to feel like they're working towards something great. something that actually can change lives, particularly in social care, something that can do something better than anybody has done before. And the support is giving them the tools and the equipment to do that. For leadership, understanding the different characteristics of individuals and how to support them within that, not just in working life, but also in the other 50% of our world, which is family life. Understand the position they are at home, understand the ethics and the beliefs that the person has, and help them bring that into a workplace environment too. And that's what brings about inclusive culture. Just to sort of like look into that a bit further, one of my favorite stories ever, and I won't give you the whole story because I'm sure people have heard it, is when President Kennedy visited NASA and asked a person what their role was, and the person turned around and said, "My role is to put a man on the moon." And it turned out the person was a janitor. So ultimately, every single person within that building believed they were on a mission, and everybody played an integral part. And I think in building an inclusive culture, you know, if all of a sudden my ambition within a care service is to deliver high quality care, giving people the tools and the skills to be able to do that, giving them the support and the well-being factors and the positivity to do that, so important. But also winning together and creating that together, as opposed to someone becoming a number. Actually, they're a person. And I think data and stats and things like that can get in the way sometimes of actually realizing that this is a person. And if a person feels cared for, they will care for someone else. If they feel uncared for, the likelihood is they'll start uncaring for someone else. And that's so important in terms of the role that we get, that they feel that care. But one of the big things I see in the care industry, too many times, and I teach this a lot, is the use of positive language. You know, I see too many negative languages being used all the time, and certainly with the economic climate we're in and everything like that, a lot of talk is negative at the moment. If you actually want to build an environment that makes people feel like they are being looked after to the highest possible standards, they are part of the community, they're in partnership with everything, then we have to have positive language that drives us forward, not negative language. So looking at that, they're my key areas. But ultimately, actually getting people to believe in what it is that you're trying to achieve, and then supporting them through that, and letting them be part of that is key. And just going back to something that Karolina said, and I'm a massive believer in this, and she's mentioned it twice now, and that is the ability to be able to fail. And that's something that we really need to integrate within industry, because we don't always get it right. And the key thing that people need to understand is you only learn from failing. You know, the toddler who is trying to walk falls over 100 times before they master it. And that's where we need to give younger people that opportunity to actually be nurtured, be coached, be mentored, be supported, because they're going to make mistakes. And we just need to be there to assure them that these things happen. Like I said, as long as there's nothing major, we should not be chastising someone and putting them out of the industry for that.
So, did you want to come in on that?
Absolutely. So the point of failure, it's great. You know, completely support. We have to let people do that. When you look at the metrics that most of us are measured on, you know, whether that's commissioners or all of the metrics that care is measured on, the ones that outside people are interested in looking at, are negative, aren't they? It's the amount of falls, it's the amount of pressure sores, it's the amount of drug incidents, etc., etc. External measures of care being delivered, there is nothing positive in there. And it's very, very easy to then get into that cycle where everybody is too scared to fail. And I think one of the ways to bring in a culture for ourselves is with, you know, well, these are the things we have to measure because they're being expected, and they are important to measure. But actually, let's look at some of those where you can actually record numbers around people receiving good care and flourishing. And even if we're only using those as internal metrics, actually being able to celebrate the things we do well is so important, you know, for teams, so that they can measure the things they're doing well. Not you had no incidents and then there was a pressure sore. You had no incidents, then there was a pressure sore. But look at all of these things. You had somebody reduce the amount of care they actually needed because they could do more. You had somebody doing this thing by themselves that they thought they wouldn't be able to do again. And that is really, really important for that whole culture and having the same aims.
Amazing. Do we? It brings to mind a book called Black Box Thinking. If anybody's ever read it or heard or listened to it, that take the aviation industry. All planes have a black box, so if anything happens, we've got the flight data that we can refer back to. Do we need a black box in social care that looks at, okay, what went wrong? Why, how can we change that? How can we change the culture? How can we look back and go, it's okay to make a mistake, but what do we learn from that mistake? And actually, what were we doing well that we didn't do so well in that period point? Is that something we need to bring in or look at?
Can I just jump? I absolutely agree with what you just said, and that's a great book. And when you take the aviation industry, you know, they moved away from the fear of being sued to the fear of let's not let this happen again by actually having open conversations, because we all look at fear as a negative. Fear isn't a negative. Fear is something that's entrenched into us and helps us discover positive solutions from it. But it's that the negative part comes from it when all of a sudden you realize that it could be catastrophic to fail. And that's what brings the fear. And these things that we're finding catastrophic aren't catastrophic. If CQC gave you a requires improvement, it's not catastrophic. If the people that live within your service are commenting that they love the service, they love the team, they're being cared for to the highest possible standards, and they wouldn't want to be anywhere else, but you got a required improvement because you got a part of your paperwork wrong, or you didn't send that notification, etc. like that, reward the team because actually they did the job, and look at the process in which you followed to try and change it. And that's the bit where I think we have got, without CQC coming after me, they have pushed almost like a policing state upon us, where you are in fear of failure. Using word, I've argued this so long, using words like inadequate, you know, that is sending a clear message to the care industry that this service should not be used. Requires improvement. It means it's not good enough. But that may be a requires improvement in areas that are nothing to do with care. And that's the message that's not being sent out. So you're labeling somewhere and expecting someone to read the report on it, and they maybe not, because they've seen the label, they've seen the title. So I think the whole, to change it all and go down a black box thinking, when CQC and the likes turn around and say we work in partnership, I've never heard so much rubbish in all my life. I've been involved with it for so long. There is no partnership, it's words. Partnership is like you said, when a big incident occurs, at what point are we all not getting around a table to make sure that that incident isn't systematic throughout the services and could likely happen again? We don't do that. You're just penalised.
I think we could sit and we could talk about this for a while. I'm conscious of the time, and we have only got through a couple of the questions so far. So I'm going to move on, and hopefully, if we've got time, we can always come back to that. So let's look at growth. So Skills for Care again. I'm going to use some of their quotes. Progressive culture is one that is transparent with regards to how staff can develop and progress in their career and skills. This ensures that staff feel valued and supported. And we can also see investing in learning and development for your team can support with keeping staff. Average turnover rates decreased from 37% among staff who had no qualifications to 26.5% among those who had qualifications. So how can we as adult social care leaders and managers embed a positive culture of continuous growth and learning? Paul, I'm going to come to you on this one because you've got your hand in many different pies. So share your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, this is something, again, I've argued, which sounds silly, being CEO of a national training organisation. But I think we need to relook at the whole statutory and mandatory style of training, because I think what's happening is it's becoming a bit monotonous. There has to be a level of learning, and then there has to be a level of competency, and then there has to be further levels of learning. And because your brain is tuned that if it already knows it or it already does it, it will switch off to it. And that's if I take, for example, I mean, I know they've changed it recently, but moving and handling used to have to be done on an annual basis within a classroom. Now, that's like somebody learning the alphabet and then having to come back every single year to relearn the alphabet. And that's where competency does need to come into it. If I want to embed a positive culture of continuous growth, then I have to allow the person to develop. I don't want them stagnated learning stuff that they already know. There's other ways in which that can be measured and to make sure that the skills and the knowledge are still there. What I want to be doing is pushing them to a point where it's continual. It's a continual development of learning. And that means taking people to a higher standard, and also looking outside of the statutory mandatories. Customer service is a course that most businesses should be doing, because it's a big part of what we do within the care industry. When we look at the younger people coming into the industry, we need to look at actually what are they likely to go through, where is it going to have an impact, and that's where things like mental health training and that come into play. But our budgets are getting absorbed all the time on the same training courses, and that creates a fixed mindset, which is the opposite to a growth mindset. That creates a tick box exercise. I just need to do it. If you want someone to grow, then allow their brain to go, oh, that's new. That's a different way. And I say this to a lot of managers in management training. Psychology is one of the greatest courses that you could ever have, or starting to learn about psychology is one of the greatest things you could have in management, because that allows you to start to understand how people think in different ways, and how we actually can help and support them. But yeah, in terms of how we can embed a positive culture of continuous growth and learning, is to actually continually move it forward and to not be stuck in the past. And that's the same with business plans. We're coming up to the end of the year. How many businesses out there are currently sat there trying to work out what they'd love to achieve by this time next year, and then communicating that to the staff, and then building training platforms around how they're going to aid the staff in order to be able to do that. In that innovation of allowing people the opportunity to come up with their own ideas and choose some courses they think will benefit them and the business if they do it. So I'm kind of like someone that we can get stuck in statutory and mandatory and lose all our money there, and that stops continual growth. There's other ways that we can test that knowledge.
That's really, really interesting point there. My wife uses a really, really interesting example that every year she'd do epilepsy awareness training, and she would go into the classroom, spend a day doing in the classroom. She came back one night and she said, I've just spent 17 years and every year I've done epilepsy awareness training, and it feels like as soon as it hits midnight the day before, they think I just forget everything.
Yeah.
And actually, looking at the culture, what that should have been is, okay, you've been here 17 years. Let's assess what you know, and then let's look at where we can grow you. And that her perspective of the culture would have been completely different. As it was, she was just seen as a number, someone to come in and do the job and move forward. We've got to get the training done because it's a tick box exercise, like you said, Paul. Karolina, thoughts on this one?
Thank you. Yes, I think for me, the first rule around growth and learning is don't assume that you know what the person knows or wants to learn. So it all needs to start with conversations with people of where they want to go, how they want to develop individual learning development plans, giving people opportunities to maybe look at areas they haven't looked, but they may have interest in, but also letting care workers express what they think would help in their own work beyond the statutory requirements or beyond what the manager thinks would be helpful. Over the many years that I've been monitoring online forums for care workers, I've seen it come up many times where care workers have said, I really want to do this training, but my manager won't let me because it's not mandatory training. It's not something they think I need. But I actually think it would really benefit people I work with. And some of it would be things that have been mentioned was de-escalation techniques, but not necessarily in services that de-escalation techniques are usually taught in, maybe in older care services where it isn't automatically training that you get. Music in dementia, for example, doing more creative activities, different approaches to people. Like Paul mentioned, things around psychology, understanding conditions. deeper or differently than the training that is compulsory. So yeah, I think it needs to start with conversation, because the learned individual knows best where the gaps are, where they think it would help more the people that they work with additional learning, and what they actually can fit in their life. It remains an issue that care workers tell us that they're not paid for training that they do. So if we're talking about, positive culture of continuous growth and learning, let's start with the basics of pay people for doing the training. It doesn't matter if it's online training. You can't tell people do it in your own time at home. It's unacceptable. It has to be paid for. It has to be part of the working day, working hours. Um, so let's make sure we have the basics right. We need to listen to people in terms of what they think they want, they need to learn. And people with their working life develop different interests in very specific areas as well. They may want to, look further around, for example, how to support people after stroke, or how to support people with dementia. And beyond of what is widely available in the sector, there are some very specialized bits of training that people could do. Um, and I think apart from assuming that you know what people know and what they want to learn, some people also fall for assuming that because somebody is a care worker, they are not academic and they don't want to learn. And that couldn't be further from truth. We've seen many care workers, taught lots of care courses over the years, and the barrier often is the manager gatekeeping courses and not allowing them to go, but also is the cost of them, because care workers express they want to do something else. They'd even want to pay for it themselves, but the costs are prohibitive. That's the barrier to access for them as well. So maybe having a pot of money for courses that are outside of regular training, I think that would be very helpful.
Amazing, thank you. Zoe, would you like to add to that?
Just a couple of points, really. So I think one of the ways, again, about embedding the culture is it's really important for everybody to see that everybody is learning and developing, sort of whatever level you're at, and that can give a form of, again, that's that transparency. You might be the boss, but you're saying, I don't know these things, so I'm going to learn about them. The other thing that's really important is that progression, and Karolina, you really started off talking about this. So progression is what somebody wants it to be. So some people want to rise up through the ranks and go to management and go to running things, but other people never want to do that. And that's where it can be more likely that they might think, well, because I don't want to become a manager, I don't want to become a ward sister, I enjoy doing the core work. They might think that learning and development, anything outside of the mandatory training, isn't for them. And that's really where bringing in Karolina's point of, it's about understanding the person, and helping them to access what will make them just have a greater breadth of skills to do their work really, really well, without them worrying about they're going to be shut in an office away from actually caring for people, which is what they want to do. So helping people understand that learning and development isn't just a way to climb the evil ladder. It's actually, if you are really good at what you do, it's a really good way of staying there and being even more brilliant.
100%. I think there's so many good points there. I think embracing learning across all levels, I think embracing the culture across all levels is what I'm getting as the impression that, if leaders demonstrate they're embracing learning, they're looking at learning for themselves. Actually, I didn't know that. There's my knowledge gap. How can I improve that? That then embraces the culture that says actually everybody needs to learn. Just because I'm registered manager with a level 7 or a level 5 doesn't mean I know everything, and actually doesn't mean I need to learn. I think there's a really good quote, and forgive me, I can't remember who said it, but it's about hiring people that do the things that you're not good at. And actually there's things that I know I'm not good at. 100%. I am the least organized person in the world. If you ask my wife, I'm terrible. But I know that there's people around me that are more organized than me, and I can support them and they can support me. So I think having that culture of supportiveness within organizations as well, to bounce off people, is really important. I'm going to move on. I'm going to use another word that comes up quite a lot alongside culture, which is well-being. So, effective social care leaders prioritize employee health and well-being through actions and attitudes that promote work-life balance, regular breaks, and flexibility. So, we've got a couple of stats there. So, we've got 41% satisfaction as high or very high. We've got 68%, 7 in 10 of the adult social workforce say they do not have enough any financial security. And Karolina, I know this is really important to you and the Care Workers charity, and it impacts well-being hugely. And again, we're going to recognise value. So a culture that makes staff feel valued can only be achieved if leadership seek to recognise and reward staff for their contributions. A celebratory culture is one that promotes employee engagement and retention by acknowledging important moments or achievements of individuals in the team. So, Zoe, I know you're huge on wellbeing. I want to come to you first. How do care leaders support staff's wellbeing and their own?
Great question, this one. Sorry, I'm just gonna put the light back on. Right. Yeah. So, having experienced burnout as well myself, again, it's knowing what happens when it goes wrong, and I think that really helps, sort of make it forward in your mind. I think acknowledging that the work that we and our teams do is really hard. It's incredibly hard. It's dealing with people all of the time. And sometimes just, your team hearing that you're having a bad day. You're there to acknowledge their bad days, but then being able to see you as a person and, and being vulnerable. I think that can actually help if it's done in the right way. One of the things I brought in when I came to Riverstone, and I realise I'm incredibly fortunate in being able to do this, is my team who work directly with the residents have a supervision once a month from a registered psychologist. And you can look, there's a cost attached with that, but actually, if you then add up cost of sick pay, cost of recruitment, actually that's something that pays for itself. It means my team are seeing real experts, and this doesn't replace the need for a quick cup of coffee and a chatty debrief, but this means that I can be confident that actually I'm keeping their mental health at the forefront of what I do, because if their mental health is good and they are feeling supported, work is going to be better, easier, more enjoyable for them, etc., etc. Karolina's already touched on the I had to do a wry smile at the cupboard office, cupboard room, because I've experienced that. No, you're losing the coffee room, you're losing the shared space. It's now a cupboard, it has no windows. That's where you can set up a cup of tea. Oh no, we're having to turn that back into a cupboard again. It's those little things like that. It's the teas and the coffees. It's the making time. It's the realizing that the 8 or 12 hours a day you see somebody of the hours that they're at work is only a fraction of their life and isn't all of their life. And sometimes the things happening outside of it can have such an impact on what actually happens in work. But yeah, it's huge. But I think acknowledging it, again, something, don't pay lip service, actually show that you're living it too.
Amazing, thank you. Karolina, I know this is well-being and it is a huge thing for you, so I'd love to know your thoughts on this.
Thank you. So we did a wellbeing survey of over 2,000 care workers, published it earlier this year. So it's on our website if you want to have a look. One of the things I wanted to bring out from it is that 22% of respondents have to use food banks, and that's going back to basic needs. If people come to work hungry, they can't be expected to do a good job. They just can't. If people can't pay their bills, they can't buy the children's school uniforms. So pay is important. It's a huge part of well-being. And I know we're in a very difficult situation in the sector where the central government isn't funding social care appropriately, but there are things that can be done to support it, and that includes meals and services, if the residential services, for example, using some of the vouchers that businesses may receive from some of the suppliers as well, and share it within the team. And just looking at each member of the team as an individual with like Zoe said, work life is part of the life, it's a big part of your life within a week in terms of hours for most people, but there is a life outside of it, and people don't exist just to work. They want to have a life outside of work, and that needs to be understood, because people live in different situations. They have faced different challenges. And I think it's fair to admit that in the world that we live in, with what we've been through in the last few years, with COVID, cost of living crisis and everything else, it is a challenging and difficult world that we live in. And most people face something difficult in their lives. So it's understanding that, having conversations, having supervisions, but not supervisions just around what you're doing right and wrong in terms of care delivery, but actually what do you need? What can we do to support you? Where are you at with your life? Is there any flexibility, like I mentioned earlier, that we can introduce? During school holidays, do your children have enough food? Because that's a fear for many families, yeah, when you during school holidays. And apart from some care providers that pay better, we still sit, on average in social care just around minimum wage, and that is an issue. So that's one thing. The other thing, as I mentioned, is that leaders sharing their own struggles to show that everybody has issues. Not everything is always okay, and it's okay to talk about it. Preferably giving your teams access to some sort of EAP services, because otherwise private counselling, that's very expensive. NHS not really in place anymore, I think, in terms of provision. Let's be realistic about that. So that's another thing. And just in terms of everything that we've spoken about, culture, leadership, training, well-being, it's being heard and listened to. And at the Care Workers Charity now, we have an advisory board and Care Worker Champions group. And they've been involved in conversation with different stakeholders. They've spoken at different conferences. They've helped write different pieces of guidance and reports. And what we advocate very strongly is that each care service should have care workers either on their board or as an advisory board or to be consulted. And that should include your well-being strategies, but that should also include when you're choosing a tech supplier, because who's going to use it at the end of the day? Whose well-being is poor tech going to impact? It's going to be your team, if it's not user-friendly, if it doesn't do what it needs to do, or if the training to use it hasn't been equitable, because it's not about quality. It's about equity of access to support, equity of access to training, equity of treatment, and understanding that everybody is an individual. And just, bring it all the way back to what I said at the beginning. We do care plans for people we support. What I'm talking about here is really having a care plan or support plan for your team members, so they can give you the best they can. So retention rates are great because they want to stay. So they feel a sense of belonging, because that's very important to any human being, to have that sense of belonging. But that takes effort, but I think is very much worth the effort, worth any kind of financial investment if the money is there. Because people don't want to give more. Care workers by nature are very giving, but we can't take advantage. And one last thing I want to say is, I really struggle with awards and people getting recognition for doing things outside of the working hours. And I judge a lot of sectors awards, and the submissions around, oh, she always comes on her free day and brings cakes and does extra 4 hours. Yes, that's why we want to nominate her for an award. Or he always stays extra 2 hours after his shift, because we should not be promoting that as a healthy way to be, because if those hours are needed, that person should be paid for it. They shouldn't be doing it in their free time. They shouldn't feel like there's an expectation. And if they want to be extra, there should be a way for them to give extra, but within the work that they do. Otherwise, and that's, I think, particularly a problem in home care, people end up spending a lot of the time outside of working hours delivering additional care because, oh, I know she'll need this. Oh, they'll need shopping. Oh, they need this. So we need to be aware that we don't put it on a pedestal where actually I think that's a problem.
And so many points there I'd love to explore in more detail. I'm really conscious of time. We've still got another question to go. Paul, can I come to you really quickly to get your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, just really quickly, I think you've spoken to 2 experts in this who've given you a lot of information. So I just look at it from a personal perspective, because I always think that that's a good place to start. At the end of the day, it's important for anybody in any part of the work force, that's CEO, MD, anywhere, all the way up, down, across, wherever you want to go, to be able to understand where their well-being is. And it's fluid, so there is no silver bullet to this. You can write the best well-being programs, but they're basically determining, well, this will make people feel better. But we are human beings, and as human beings, you can wake up bright and early in the morning and be ready to go at life, and by the end of the day, you could have gone to the other extreme where you don't want to wake up the next morning, and that's how we factor. That's emotions, etc., like that. So I think when I look at my team, it's about understanding them. It's about knowing them. It's about having gut instinct, putting things in there to support them in the same way that you would your family members. You would know if something was wrong, if your partner is looking at you in a certain way. You just would. And then how can you help that person? What Karolina mentioned, and it was funny because Zoe referred to it before, but as Karolina was talking, she was actually describing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, without going through it all in detail, it's the simplest thing that you can look at, and it's something that I identify myself when I'm not feeling right. Where is it not working? Is it my physiological or psychological needs? Am I not getting enough sleep? Am I not eating correctly? Am I not getting out into fresh air? Do I feel safe? Do I feel like I belong? Do I feel respected? How is my self-esteem? And all the way up to becoming me, which is a self-actualization. That's just a very brief look at it. But ultimately, if you feel that something's not right with someone, actually sitting down, communicating, identifying, and looking at ways you can help them. And within organizations, we have so many ways that we can help people that we close the door to. So opposite to what Karolina said in terms of open door. If you've got somebody that's having financial problems, it may not be that they need financial assistance in terms of money. It may be that they don't understand APR. They don't understand how to actually live within the means of their. You have people in your business that may be a financial director or work in accounts. How can you actually get those people to help people in those situations? But first of all, you've got to understand it in terms of work-life balance. Understand that family is important to everybody, and anything that is conflicting in the family life outside will conflict in the family life inside. So you've got to be able to look at it and go, I'm not just taking on this person and bringing them into my family, I'm bringing in their family too. And how can I support and help that person? So just very quickly, I think the first thing to do is look at yourself and realize you have ups and downs, and what do you do to support that, and how can you help others with their ups and downs?
Amazing, thank you. Like I said, we could sit and talk and carry on going through this.
Absolutely, but on that one, yeah.
We could. There's so many points I'd love to expand on. Gonna kind of jump to recruitment a little bit. So improved workplace wellbeing means people are more likely to stay in their jobs, making it easier to deliver high quality, sustainable services. By implementing a comprehensive support system for our staff's physical and mental well-being, care providers David Lewis cut staff turnover within the first year of employment by 14%, which I think is huge. And then limited financial resources, time constraints, and a shortage of personnel can impede the long-term implementation of well-being practices, which may be seen as secondary to core business operations. I think there's a couple of really interesting quotes there. So I think my last question is, how can small or resource limited care providers realistically embed well-being into their culture? Karolina, can I come to you first in 1 minute, if you can?
Right, so we have a site posting page on our website that can direct people to some of those resources and where co-workers can go for help on different issues. And secondly, not everything costs money. Recognition can very easily be achieved without huge financial resource in place, but it has to be true recognition, not a tick box, care of the month, and we do it to a different person every month so nobody feels excluded, but actually having a nice program in place that recognizes that, but doesn't create this expectation that you have to do things outside of your working hours to be recognized as the co-worker of the month, for example. And frequent contact and conversations. You talk to people, you know people, then when something goes wrong, when they just don't look right. You know, you need to ask. They don't have to come to you. You can prompt and say, are you okay? Or I can see you are not okay. How can I help you?
Amazing. Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, so I think similar to what I loved what Karolina said in terms of you don't always need finance. I actually think it's sometimes much easier in a smaller company to have well-being, because you know people as individuals and you get to know them. The bigger you go, the harder that becomes, and you end up putting more systems in place which can actually start to destroy it. But it's the only way that you can kind of try and tick the box and control it. To me, I've always looked at, there was someone once turned around to me and said that when we're looking at teams, you should look at something called PAR, and that is the three things that are very important to people. And the first one, the P, is progress. So progress, okay, it doesn't have to go up the way, as Zoe said, it can go sideways, but people always want to be better than what they were, always. You know, in any way, shape, form in life. Everybody wants next year to be better than this year. And that doesn't always mean financially. It might be going on more holidays. It might be walking the dog more. They always want to progress. Autonomy is the A. So actually allow people to do the blooming job that you're asking them to do, and don't micromanage them all the way. People are very clever. Carers are some of the most cleverest people I know, because they have to deal with so many factors of a person's life. It's just not driven in. They don't have to focus in one area. They have to be holistically looking at everything all the time and making decisions and quick solutions in the moment. So give them the autonomy, give them the skills, and then give them the autonomy to do the job. And then recognition, as was said, it comes in many forms. It's not a high five, it's not a hand clap. Actually show people that you believe in them, and show people that they're an integral part of what it is that you do. And if you can meet those first three things, you will absolutely start to recognise good well-being in your culture.
Amazing. Thanks, Paul. Zoe, finally to you.
Very, very short. I'm just going to go back to a line I've already said. Treat people as people.
I love that. I love that. That has really resonated with me. I'm conscious of time. We are going to stay on. Hopefully our panelists can stay on. We're going to go through a couple of questions. I think Zoe's got to go. Before you do go, Zoe, I have one question for you. Is staff rarely get breaks. There isn't anywhere to go, and this is a real issue and can make staff resentful. How can we get around this?
I'm going to say don't take it away in the first place. So most of the time when staff have nowhere to go, it's because the space has been taken away. So I think the first thing is don't take away the space in the first place. If the space is already gone, you have got to find some space. You know, it might be that you're starting small. So maybe a cupboard with a kettle in it is better than no space at all. But if that's what you're having to put in, acknowledge that that is temporary. But yeah, I think the big thing is don't take the space away in the first place, because once you've done that, and then if you've got a space for teas, coffees, goodness sake, provide the tea bags, provide some instant coffee, provide some biscuits. They are cheap. And just, you know, it can make people feel so much better. They might want to bring in fancier stuff for themselves, but just those tiny little gestures are actually huge. They might feel small to us, but those are really important gestures.
Amazing. Thank you, Zoe, and thank you for joining us. We've had another question, which Paul, this was probably one for you. Please, can you elaborate on the other ways to test knowledge rather than simply doing the same training year after year? For example, we issue the fire safety awareness training annually in order to ensure our staff's health and safety knowledge is compliant. What else could we do?
Okay, so there's a huge push for this at the moment, and it's recognised within the single assessment framework. It's always been around, but it's become much more prominent, and that's competency assessing. So if we, and Skills for Care have recognised this as well as Skills for Health. So realistically speaking, if someone has had the education in the first place and they continue to show it, then we need to do observational competencies of practice and reflective accounts to actually ensure that their knowledge and skills are still up to date. If we can do those competencies and they are robust enough to cover the criteria on a course, then that is good enough as a certificate of compliance, if you like. And we can do them in every area. So you talk about fire awareness. That's a really good place to start. You will also be doing fire evacuation drills. A fire evacuation drill is a competency assessment. So what you need during those drills is people competency assessing the actions of how people are doing it. And once you actually can sit down with individuals at that point and say, actually, the way that you approach the door, the way that you felt for the door handle, everything like this, I don't think you need to go back on that training course, or we can sign you off for this for another year until we do another competency on you. So competency assessments are a huge thing going forward, and they are being recognised. I'm going to, if I can, just a little plug. I created a system called Confident Competence. It's a global library of competencies. If you want to have a look at it, get in touch. But that will be the way forward. It doesn't replace education, but once the education is there, we want to use competency assessments to make sure it is being maintained. They have to be observational, not academia, so we need to see it in practice. That will be accepted, and that allows your budget to be spent elsewhere on critical training that will drive your business forward.
Amazing. Thanks, Paul. Karolina, anything you'd like to add to either of those two?
No, I completely agree with Paul on the competency rating. I think, asking people to do the same thing over and over again, it's pushing them down rather than helping them develop. And it can be done in so many different ways. I think observing people, it's obviously easier in residential settings than it is in home care, but it is possible in home care. And I think too many home care providers are a bit anxious about going into the homes of people they support for that kind of supervision. But I don't think that should be given up on, because that's a great way to actually assess competency of a care worker, the relationship, the rapport they build up, the support they provide, the tasks that they do sometimes almost automatically because they've been doing it for 3 or 4 years. Are they actually doing it right? Because training is one thing, but actually applying something in practice can be quite different, especially in an environment of somebody's home, if the person may wish or may say, oh, actually, I want you to do it like this. So it is important to have that in the setting supervision as well.
Just on that, it's another form of recognition, because you are recognizing someone's ability to be able to do the work, and you are, you're showing praise for that. And areas where you feel that they're weaker is the areas that you're now going to support them to help them build on that. It's the support and recognition package all in one. Sending them straight back to a classroom where they've had to do it year after year after year, that's not recognizing anything. That's like you said with your wife. It's like saying, oh, they must think I forgot how to do this.
I think 100%. I think it's recognition, and it's a simple way of recognizing the experience of the staff you've got and the team that you've got. And actually, it's looking at the culture to say, our culture isn't one of we do that because it's a tick box exercise. We do that because there's a need for learning, but then we also look at where staff are competent, and we look at the other areas where they can learn as well. I think there's been so many comments today that have been amazing. I'd love to go through all of them, but unfortunately we don't have the time. We have gone over time. I hope that everybody's found this really, really useful. Personally, for me, I've found it amazing. We've had discussions before this webinar, and we talked for a long time, and there's so much that I've learned from this that I can't express. That we could probably talk for another hour on this and go back to the questions and expand on them and ask more questions. But I hope everybody's found it really, really useful. I hope some people can take something away that, even if it's a small thing, that they can embed in their service and in their culture. A huge thank you to Karolina, to Paul and Zoe for joining us and taking some time out of their days. And a huge thank you to everybody that's joined and taken some time out of your day as well. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much. This will be shared, so it will be shared once in a week or so, once we've got it all edited out and up to date. We'll put some of the comments on, we'll put the questions in as well. But if anybody does have any questions, please do feel free to reach out to us. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.